Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and today Yamaha announced a big update to the MT-07 with lots of changes and also an important new killer feature. But is it enough to make this bike the best middleweight naked to buy in 2025? Well, in this video we'll go through the 13 key things that you need to know about it to find out. Now, firstly, a bit of context. You see, the MT-07 has been a huge seller over the years for Yamaha, and I believe that's for multiple reasons. Number one is the fact that the engine is super lively despite perhaps quite modest looking figures on the spec sheet. It's really got a very direct throttle response that makes it a lot of fun to ride. And then also it's super lightweight as well, which makes it really easy to get on with, but also makes it feel quite agile and sporty, and it'll wheelie as well with that very snappy throttle without any question. Then you got the fact that it's also built to a decent price, so it's always been pretty affordable. And then you've got to consider that some of the other stuff on the market when this bike was first introduced was just all right. Things like the Kawasaki Z650 or the Suzuki SV650, well, they're decent bikes, especially the SV, but perhaps not quite so fun or lively or garish or loud looking as something like the MT-07. So yeah, basically it had it really good for quite a few years until a couple of years back when some of the other manufacturers really started to take this market quite seriously, and that's probably as a result of the MT-07 selling so well. So yeah, we've had the Trident 660 from Triumph, the Honda Hornet, the Suzuki GSX 8S, all in the last couple of years, and they're really good. They've all got more power than the MT-07. Some of them are far better handling as well, and then also they're full of the latest convenient techie features as well, and all for a similar price to the MT-07, if not in some cases like the Hornet being quite significantly cheaper. The MT-07 over the past couple of years, well, they've tweaked the styling, they've given it a TFT Dash, but fundamentally it's really stayed the same, and so I think this big refresh was definitely needed to put it back in proper contention. So look, the engine does stay the same. It's the 690cc CP2 parallel twin that makes about 72 horsepower and 67 newton meters of peak torque. But like I say, it was already a standout feature of this bike, and so it didn't really need anything major changing about it. They have added a slip assist clutch to make it feel a bit lighter at the lever. It's also going to be smoother to shift down under aggressive downshifts, and presumably they've also cleaned it up a bit for the latest Euro 5B emissions regulations. But other than that, there's nothing vastly different. The only thing I will point out is the introduction of the acoustic amplifier system that they've also previously used on the MT-09 and the MT-10, which basically means they've designed the intake system to be specifically quite loud and bassy, and then you've got a bunch of little gaps in the tank that aim to project that sound right into your face, so you get plenty of induction sound under acceleration. Now, I've tried it on the other bikes, really good. The CP2's a nice sounding engine as well, so even more of that piped straight into your face can only be a good thing in my book. I think for me the area where it did need a bit of attention was with the handling, because although it is quite lightweight, the previous gen just felt a bit soft and wallowy on the suspension and a bit unrefined, and especially when you've got bikes like the Trident, which is really sharp handling, well yeah, the MT-07 couldn't really compare. Now, firstly, they've revised the frame, so it's still tubular steel, but it's been almost entirely redesigned, and they say that's led to 12% more rigidity all round. On top of that, they've also significantly reworked the swing arm pivot, as well as made changes to the swing arm itself, and they now say it's more stable to ride and also has better handling whilst carrying luggage. Not that that's a particularly common use case of this bike, but good to know if you're planning on doing a couple of weekends away. The thing that really needed an update though, I think, was the suspension. Like I say, it did feel very basic, and so it's great to see that you now get a 41mm upside down fork to replace the old school right way up fork on the previous gen, and also the rear shock and the linkage have been tweaked and optimized, they say, for a better ride. On top of that, they also say the fork is responsible for about 0.5 kilogram of weight savings too, along with the new triple clamp design, and so that contributes to a lighter overall weight, which we'll get onto in a moment. Brakes have also been upgraded, so they've ditched the 4-pot axial calipers on the previous gen for some new radially mounted calipers on this one, and generally you should find that these these radially mounted calipers are a little more rigid, which leads to a more consistent feel at the lever and also like a crisper feel too. Wheels have been changed as well, so these ones are now spin forged, a technique that they've used on other bikes like the MT-09 before. And the idea with spin forging is that they can make the aluminium at the rim super thin without having to compromise on strength. So again, another reduction in the overall weight of the bike, but also the fact that it's both rotating and unsprung mass should mean that this has a more significant effect on the way the bike handles and changes direction. Now, one tweak they also made for the MT-09 for 2024 was to change the riding position, because previously it was a little bit too sat up and it had these big handlebar risers and it made you feel a bit like you were riding a supermoto style bike. For the new model year, they made it a bit flatter, which is more typical of a sporty naked bike, and I think it was very much for the better on that bike. And it looks like they've gone in a roughly similar direction with this MT-07 as well. So the bars are 22mm lower and 9mm further back, so they are a little closer, but they're significantly down. But at the same time, they've preserved the seat height of 805mm and also dropped the foot pegs by 10mm to give you a bit more space. So while the top of your body might feel a little bit more sporty and lower over the front, with that moderate seat height and open leg angle, it should still be fairly comfy and day-to-day usable. So look, a more sporty feel with the bars and also more sporty handling with that more rigid frame, the better suspension, the better brakes, the lighter wheels. Well, for me, it feels like they've really addressed one of the big areas in which this bike fell a little bit behind the competition. Thing is though, there was also the tech package, which was starting to look a bit basic, and it kind of stemmed back to the fact that it was still using a traditional cable throttle. This meant that some of the more modern features like traction control, rider aids, cruise control and stuff like that just technically weren't possible on that previous gen bike. And so it's great news for 2025 that this bike now gets a ride-by-wire throttle. That means you've now got two modes of street and sport, as well as a custom slot for your own settings. And within that, you can choose between 3 different levels of power, along with 2 levels of traction control, and also the ability to still switch it off. So good for those people who like to buy these bikes for wheelies. All these settings are managed through a 5-inch TFT Dash. I'm not sure, that might be the same as the previous gen, or you can manage the settings through the Yamaha My Ride app. And on top of all that, you've got connectivity features with the Dash as well, so you can control your music and calls, and pair with the Garmin Street Cross app to get turn-by-turn nav as well. New switchgear can be used to navigate all of these new features, along with the fact that it's now got self-cancelling indicators, which have a short 3-flash mode for lane changes and stuff like that, with a soft press of the indicator button. Then you also get that emergency stop signal feature, which is something that's getting more and more common on bikes now, and basically that flashes the rear indicators when it detects that you're braking hard in order to warn drivers and riders behind you to stop them from shunting into you from behind. So yeah, very much upgraded in the tech department, although the question I've got is whether that's actually a good thing, so I'd love to know what you think down in the comments below. The MT-07 used to be a very simple bike, and I think that's one of the reasons that people really loved it. So do you think this new techie version is more desirable or less? One argument against it, I guess, is all the weight that this new stuff adds. And Yamaha say in the press release themselves that if they hadn't made any changes to the rest of the bike, it would have added about 4.5 kilograms. Thing is though, with all the weight savings on the rest of the bike, we already mentioned the fork and the wheels, and they also say they looked into some more minor stuff like the airbox, the chain, and even the fuel filler cap. Well, they've actually managed to deliver a weight saving on this bike of 1 kilogram, so it now comes in at a really impressive 183 kilograms. The weight was one of the best things about this bike previously. It was one of the standout features, and so it's really good to see that they've managed to preserve that despite bringing in all this new functionality. Plus, it's all wrapped up in a new styling package, which I think is probably going to be a bit more broadly palatable to more people. The previous gen had this very distinctive but perhaps polarizing headlight design, whereas this new gen, well, it looks a lot more in line with the MT-09, very similar in terms of the front end, and I reckon personally that that's a good thing. I think it's much more of a nice looking bike. As usual, it'll be available in 3 colors, and you'll get Icon Blue and Tech Black, which are pretty much always in the lineup. And then the third option for this year is Ice Storm, which I think might be the best of the bunch, but let me know which you'd pick down in the comments. So overall, I think it really does look much more so on a par with the competition now. If you look at all the different areas of this bike in terms of the spec, the features, the tech, the level of hardware on the chassis. But is there any one key killer feature that really makes it stand out from the bunch? And I'd argue, apart from the weight, not really. It just kind of pulls it up to their level, whereas before it did feel like it was lagging behind a touch. But then I read that in the press release, this is the second bike that's going to be made available with the AMT or automated manual transmission. Now, the first bike was the MT-09, so it's not a massive surprise to see it here. And basically that means you got rid of the clutch, so you can ride it as a twist and go, but also you can stick it in an automatic mode and the bike will choose the gears on your behalf. It's got two actuators, one on the clutch, one on the gearbox, and so it can do basically everything for you, and it makes it really quite easy to ride. You can also stick it in the manual mode, which means you can use the buttons on the switchgear to go up and down the gearbox. And yeah, after having ridden it on the MT-09, I was really quite impressed. The gear shifts are super slick, but I do feel like the ease and convenience of riding is going to be more suited to this bike when you consider that it's more likely to be bought by newer and less experienced riders than the MT-09. I will say though, even if you are more experienced, I'd definitely still give this a go and take one for a demo, just because of how satisfying the little shifts are when you're using the buttons on the switchgear, and you might just find that you really enjoy it and really get on with it. And then also consider that the AMT version of this new 2025 MT-07 update, well, it's the one that gets cruise control fitted as standard, and I don't think it's even an option on the manual bike. I should point out as well that the AMT system adds 3 kilograms in terms of weight, but it's not so significant that it'll really impact the handling, and also even with the AMT it's still lighter than quite a lot of the competition. Now unfortunately there's no UK price on these as of yet, which is a bit of a shame because it's that really important piece of context. You know, there's no point in adding loads of features to a bike if you double the price, but they will be available at Motorcycle Live, where both the manual version of this bike and the AMT will be on show for the first time in the UK, so go and check them out there, and also you get the pricing. And I will say generally Yamaha are pretty decent on price, so I'm not expecting them to be super expensive. Currently, a manual MT-07 is about 7.5 grand, so you'd hope they'd be looking to keep it the right side of 8K to keep it competitive with the Trident, for example. As always though, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below. And with the updates, do you think it's right up there with the rest of the bikes in this class? For me, the engine was already really good. Like I say, the weight was a big strength, and it feels like they've really sharpened it up with the better brakes and suspension, the lighter wheels, and also this new tech package, and so really it does sit right up there. If you do want an automatic bike, then in that middleweight affordable naked class, it's your only option now, apart from maybe the e-clutch version of the CB650R from Honda, but look, that only does the clutch and not the gearbox, so really that could be, if you're looking for that sort of tech, a massive selling point of this new MT-07. So yeah, let me know what you think down below, and also I'll put on the screen now my overview of the MT lineup, which shows the differences between the MT-07, the MT-09 and the MT-10, with the goal of finding out which one is actually the best road bike. So do give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't already. Also, do hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.